सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मुहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मुहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम। Those who are sitting or standing, I will request them to sit down. जो हजरात बाहर बैठे हुए हैं कुर्सियों पर, मैं उनसे अर्ज करूंगा कि वो यहाँ अंदर आकर बैठें। और जो लोग पैर फैला कर बैठे हुए हैं, बेअदबाना तरीके से बैठे हुए हैं, मैं उनसे कहूंगा कि नहायत अदब के साथ बैठें। ये दरबार है जनाब रसूल अकरम सल्लल्लाहु तआला अलैहि वसल्लम का। It is not an ordinary meeting. You should sit with complete manners, observe manners and sit with manners. All those who are standing outside, they should come inside and sit down.
Alhamdulillahi wahda wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da. Allahumma ya mufattih al-abwab wa ya musabbib al-asbab wa ya dalil al-hairin tawakkaltu alayka ya rabbal alamin wa ufawwidu amri ila Allah inna Allaha basirun bil ibad. Amma ba'd, fa a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. या अय्युहल्लज़ीना आमनु इत्तक़ुल्लाहा व कूनू मअस-सादिक़ीन। सदक़ल्लाहुल अज़ीम। सब तारीफ़ें अल्लाह रब्बुल इज़्ज़त के लिए और बेशुमार दुरूद व सलाम सय्यदुल मुरसलीन ख़ातमुन नबिय्यीन मुहम्मदुर रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु तआला अलैहि व आलिहि वसल्लम पर अल्लाह रब्बुल इज़्ज़त की बारगाह में हम दुआगो हैं। परवरदिगार आलम हम सब को नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की इत्तिबा और इताअत की तौफ़ीक़ अता फ़रमाए। हमारी आज की ये नशिस्त गुज़िश्ता सदी के मुबल्लिग़ आज़म हज़रत शाह अब्दुल अलीम सिद्दीक़ी मीरठी रहमतुल्लाहि ताला अलैह की याद में इनेक़ाद पज़ीर है। और हमारी आज की इस नशिस्त का उन्वान लाइफ एंड थॉट ऑफ मौलाना अब्दुल अलीम सिद्दीकी रहमतुल्लाहि ताला अलैह है। अगरचे हमने तमाम हमारे सर्किल के अहबाब को दावत दी है, लेकिन खुसूसी तौर पर हमने आज इनवाइट किया है अपने उन तमाम ग्रेजुएट्स को या उन तमाम अहबाब और मुताल्लिक़ीन को जो अलीमिया इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ इस्लामिक स्टडीज़ से किसी भी नौइयत का कोई ताल्लुक़ रखते हैं, जिन्होंने हज़रत सय्याह आलम डॉक्टर फ़ज़लुर रहमान अल अंसारी अल क़ादरी रहमतुल्लाहि ताला अलैह के इदारे से तालीम हासिल की है, या जिन तमाम अहबाब ने किसी भी नौइयत का एक अक़ीदत और मोहब्बत का ताल्लुक़ इन दो बुज़ुर्ग हस्तियों से कायम रखा है। बिलाशुबा हज़रत शाह अब्दुल अलीम सिद्दीक़ी रहमतुल्लाहि ताला अलैह एक नहायत ही जलीलुल क़द्र आलिम दीन और मुबल्लिग़ इस्लाम हैं, जिन्होंने दुनिया के मुख्तलिफ़ ख़ित्तों में बराह रास्त तशरीफ़ ले जाकर इस्लाम की दावत व तबलीग़ का एक ऐसा अज़ीम कारनामा सर अंजाम दिया है जिसे गुज़िश्ता सदी में कोई और मुबल्लिग़ सर अंजाम नहीं दे सका, जिसका वाज़ेह और बय्यन सबूत यह है कि आपने दुनिया का तकरीबन राउंड द ग्लोब 3 मरतबा आपने इस्लाम की दावत व तबलीग़ के सिलसिले में दौरा फरमाया और मशरिक़ ता मग़रिब, शिमाल ता जनूब, आप दुनिया के हर ख़ित्ते में इस्लाम की दावत और तबलीग़ के लिए तशरीफ़ ले जाते रहे। और यकीनन उनके एक अज़ीमुल मर्तबत बेटे, जिन्होंने न सिर्फ़ मुल्क पाकिस्तान में बल्कि पूरी दुनिया में इस्लाम की तबलीग़ का एक अज़ीम कारनामा सर अंजाम दिया है, जिन्हें पाकिस्तान में लोग क़ायद अहले सुन्नत या क़ायद मिल्लत इस्लामिया के नाम से जानते हैं। मेरी मुराद हज़रत अल्लामा शाह अहमद नूरानी रहमतुल्लाहि ताला अलैह। ये तमाम ऐसी अज़ीम शख्सियात हैं कि जब हम इनका तज़किरा सुनते हैं, इनका ज़िक्र हमारी समातों से टकराता है, तो परवरदिगार आलम हमें इन बुज़ुर्ग हस्तियों के ज़िक्र के तोफ़ैल हमें भी ये हिम्मत अता फ़रमाता है कि हम अल्लाह तबारक व तआला के दीन की खिदमत के लिए कमर बस्ता हो सकें। इंशाअल्लाह हमें ट्रिनिडाद एंड टोबैगो से डॉक्टर वाफ़ी मोहम्मद भी ज्वाइन करेंगे और डॉक्टर अबुल फ़ज़ल मोहसिन इब्राहीम जो حضرت ڈاکٹر فضل الرحمان انصاری علیہ رحمہ کے یہ تمام اسٹوڈنٹس میں سے ہیں. انشاءاللہ تعالی وہ بھی ہمیں ساؤتھ افریقہ سے جوائن کریں گے. ڈاکٹر عبد القادر چوغلے ہمیں جوائن کر چکے ہیں. تو اس نشست کا باقاعدہ آغاز ہم تلاوت کلام مجید سے کر رہے ہیں. میں قاری صاحب سے ملتمس ہوں، مفتی صاحب سے، کہ آپ قرآن مجید کی تلاوت اور نبی کریم صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کی نعت سے اس کا آغاز فرمائیں. مفتی سعید صاحب آپ قرآن مجید کی تلاوت سے اس پروگرام کا آغاز کریں.
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. واللہ الذی لا الہ الا عالم الغیب والشہادة هو الرحمن الرحیم.
Recording in progress.
واللہ الذی لا الہ الا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون. والله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. آمنت بالله صدق الله العظيم.
بہت شکریہ جناب محترم مفتی محمد سعید. تلاوت کلام مجید سے آغاز فرما رہے تھے. میں مفتی صاحب سے ملتمس ہوں، علامہ زبیر صاحب سے، کہ آپ نبی کریم صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کی شان میں ہدیہ نعت پیش فرمائیں.
صلی اللہ علیک یا رسول اللہ وسلم علیک یا حبیب اللہ. بلغ العلا بکمالہ بلغ العلا بکمالہ کشف الدجا بجمالہ حسن جمیع خصالہ. صلوا علیہ وآلہ صلوا علیہ وآلہ. وہ کمال حسن حضور ہے کہ گمان نقص جہاں نہیں. وہ کمال حسن حضور ہے کہ گمان نقص جہاں نہیں. یہی پھول خار سے دور ہے، یہی شمع ہے کہ دھواں نہیں. صلو علیہ وآلہ.
جزاکم اللہ فی الدارین. علیمیہ کے گریجویٹ جناب محترم علامہ زبیر ظفر نبی کریم صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کی شان میں نعت رسول مقبول صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کا ہدیہ پیش فرما رہے تھے. ہمیں جوائن کیا ہے علیمیہ کے ہی گریجویٹس میں سے जनाब मोहतरम डॉक्टर इमरान ख़ान साहब ने, जो इस वक्त DBF सीरत रिसर्च इंसाइक्लोपीडिया के डायरेक्टर की हैसियत से अपनी खिदमत सर अंजाम दे रहे हैं। आपके अलावा हमारे लिए बहुत लायक एहतराम हमारे उस्ताद जनाब प्रोफेसर आमिर बेग साहब, जो अलीमिया में एक तवील अरसे तक दर्स व तदरीस के फ़राइज़ सर अंजाम देते रहे और ख़ुद भी अलीमियन हैं। एक तवील अरसे आपने अलीमिया में बहैसियत एक तालिब इल्म पहले अपने खिदमात वहाँ पर मुहैया की हैं, बहैसियत एक तालिब इल्म भी, और बाद में आप जॉइंट सेक्रेटरी की हैसियत से भी वर्ल्ड फेडरेशन ऑफ इस्लामिक मिशंस में काम करते रहे। और इस वक्त आपको कराची में बिलखुसूस जो सुफ़ा स्कूलिंग सिस्टम नज़र आता है, तो सर की ज़ेर निगरानी बहुत सी ब्रांचेज़ उस इदारे की इस वक्त काम कर रही हैं। इसके अलावा हमें और दीगर ग्रेजुएट्स ने ज्वाइन किया है, मैं आप तमाम को खुशामदीद कहता हूँ। इसके अलावा दीगर अहले इल्म हज़रात तशरीफ़ लाए हैं, मैं आप तमाम को खुशामदीद कहता हूँ। हमारी ज़्यादातर ख्वाहिश ये है कि हम उन लोगों से इस्तिफ़ादा करें जो इस वक्त पाकिस्तान से बाहर हैं और वो अपने ख़यालात का इजहार करें ताकि हम ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा उनको सुन सकें। तो मैं सबसे पहले गुजारिश करना चाहूँगा, I would like to request Dr. Abdul Qadir Choughlay, who has joined us from South Africa, Durban. And Dr. Abdul Qadir Choughlay is a South African Islamic scholar and educationalist. He had written a very marvelous book on Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui, his life, thought and his services for Islam. I humbly request Dr. Abdul Qadir Choughlay to turn on his mic and commence his speech, please.
For me, what is most important is that I've been honored by my murabbi, my young murabbi, and that is Dr. Umair Siddiqui. He's always been my mentor, and I'm always honored to be associated with him. And the fact that he has started such a great initiative, that in itself tells us. More importantly, in the company of the mashayikh and the ulama of Pakistan and abroad, I would like to share my humble views on a great personality. Just recently, Dr. Umair, I did a revised version on Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui and his mission. I don't know if you can see this copy. It's just come out recently, which I will be sending. It's an updated version.
Okay.
It's an updated version on my previous book. And I've added lots of information based on what you have sent me as well. And in itself, I've realized for myself that the term Muballigh Islam has taken on a very vast meaning nowadays, because when we think of a muballigh in the 21st century, we're thinking in a limited way of someone who's done great efforts for the propagation of deen. But Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui, rahimahullah, was uniquely placed in a situation. You know, we're not going to talk about geopolitics of the 20th century, but a personality, you know, it is very difficult to use the word multidimensional, because on many occasions he goes beyond that framework of being a multidimensional, because every time as people begin to appreciate his work, they begin to realize he was a versatile figure. He had such a dynamic personality that it is very difficult to even place him, to inbox him, if I have to use that word, to say this was Hazrat Abdul Aleem Siddiqui. For us in South Africa, we have seen him very differently for several reasons. I'm thinking of 1934, when he came to South Africa, the change and the contributions he made. I mean, we use the word karname in this case, but the English word contribution doesn't tell us much, really speaking. It has its own limitations. And 1934, keeping in mind what South Africa was and the racist policies of the government and the Indian settlement in South Africa, Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui was bold enough to challenge the policies of the day and remind the Muslims, particularly of Indian origin, or perhaps a Pakistani origin as well, because it was undivided India, reminding them that you have a great role to play as far as Tabligh is concerned, and imparting Tabligh to the indigenous people. And mind you, Dr. Umair and our honored guest, he was the first to raise this issue. Can you imagine the vision that Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui had for South Africans? And when it came to 1952, we just can't imagine the change he made in the country. Many of us who have read the books, in Urdu, I think there is a translation also of one of the books written by one of the graduates there, some Sheikh Yahya. I don't know his full name at this moment. And he had written about it 1952. 1952 was a turning point in South African Muslim history. It just didn't refer to Indian Muslims, but it referred to Muslims of all nationalities. The fact that Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui could address a crowd in Cape Town of more than 60,000 attendees. 60,000 attendees is an achievement. And what did he speak? Just what we had just read in honor of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That should tell us something. That the fact that the whole theme was on Mawlud al-Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Can you imagine the impact he made at that time? Can you imagine that there was a whole cavalcade, from the mayoral committee, from the white authorities, honoring such a person? And what was his message? We always hear this. Number one, connecting ourselves to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Much more than that, Maulana Siddiqui was a figure who changed the history, the landscape of the Muslims in the country. And this part we need to understand. Just as we see him going to Trinidad, just as we see him going to the Philippines, and we know the famous incidents of his karama in this case, there are so many other incidents, even related to the community of Mauritius. Dr. Umair, you have been there and you have sent me those lovely pics, and I'm sure what I'm saying, those personal experiences, you can confirm that suggests so much about this person. The most important thing which I have understood about our Muballigh Islam, a unique personality that will go in the annals, in the pages of history, as someone who belongs not only to the 20th and 21st century, but he belongs to our Aslaf. And that is what makes him so unique. A personality who was so dynamic, who was so versatile, and he could speak, he could relate to different types of audiences. Just now I heard one of his speeches, brilliant speech, brilliant lecture. Although we speak of Bernard Shaw, for example, but much more than that, he reached out to different types of people. He reached out to ordinary people. He reached out to ulama of different orientations, of different thinking. He reached out to intellectuals. Now, this in itself tells us something about him, that Allah Rabbul Izzah had blessed him with a personality that we need to appreciate and appreciate and appreciate. Sorry for my repetition here. I have in my studies, in this case, I'm using, this is like a personal journey for me as well. That Zati Safar, okay, that this personal journey of mine relating, it goes back to a good few decades. It goes right up to the 50s when I heard my own father, rahimahullah, was also in different ways connected. There was a photograph of his, which I couldn't figure out. It was only until recently when I saw that pic of his, then I realized that what a man, what a personality that came to the country. And then I began to read how different he was, how he connected. Dr. Umair, you have written so much also. When he went to different parts of the country, for me, the most important thing that I began to think and very deeply were the modes of transport. He went by ship, he went by plane, and he came into the heart of Africa. Now, many of us haven't really understood the challenges that he faced when he came to Africa. He came to Africa. He came to East Africa. He spoke Swahili. When did he speak Swahili? He went to Japan, and we saw that 1933, 1936 in this case, with the Kyobe Mosque, for example, addressing the Japanese and giving one of the brilliant speeches about Islam and science, and speaking to the refugee communities. I think they were Turkmens in this case, and they were refugees, but they were academics in this case. And he managed to communicate with them. But for me, more importantly, is that how did he communicate with people from East Africa? Besides the English language, they had to speak Swahili as well. And our Hazrat, our influential figure, spoke with confidence. And wherever he went, he attempted to learn the language, even if it was basic, so he could relate to them. And there are so many countries where he has been in this case. Many a times we found recently with the information that I got about Ceylon or about Sri Lanka. He was there in the 1920s, 1920, to be precise, 1928. And Dr. Umair, you'll know better with this, with the gentleman from Dr. Mr. Abdul Razak from Mauritius. He connected with him, and because they had businesses in Colombo, and then he came to Mauritius and he set up things. Can we believe a man of his vision not only came to make da'wah or tabligh? What did he set up? Besides the masjid was just not his project. Maktab was just not only his project. Immediately he set up orphanages. More importantly, in the 1930s, I sometimes wonder what passed through his mind. He set up a rehab center. Who would have ever thought that he would set up a rehabilitation center? Because he understood the needs of the community and he related to them. He would go right to the outskirts, to the rural areas, and there he would be amongst them, for example. And this is what he did. Coming back to South Africa is made of diverse communities. It's not made out of Indo-Pak. There is this whole community, we call them the Cape Muslims, from Indonesia itself. They have been there for over 3 centuries. Can you imagine the shuyukh of that time? We had great mashayikh, studied in Makkah, etc. When they saw Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui, and he spoke in that impeccable Arabic, can you imagine what he did to them? Their hearts turned, and here was a sheikh who was not only the sheikh of Indo-Pak, but he was the sheikh of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Have I covered the time? I don't want to go beyond the time limit.
Thank you very much. I am very much indebted and thankful to Dr. Abdul Qadir Choughlay from Durban, South Africa, who spoke very eloquently about the life history and thought and services and endeavors made by His Eminence Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. We pray to Allah that may He confer His choices, blessings on Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui. And let me tell you, when I visited Mauritius in 2018, I visited the orphanages the rehabilitation centers made by Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi in Mauritius. And I've met so many people there, and they admitted that if we are Muslim today, that is because of the services made by Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui rahmatullahi.
Ameen. Ameen.
After the Fajr prayer, they recite Surah Yasin, and after the prayer of Isha, they recite Surah Al-Mulk. And this was a tradition which was set for them by Maulana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui rahmatullahi ta'ala.